Now, going back to, in an interview I read that you've done previously, talking about the National Loan Guarantee Scheme that the Conservative is advocating, you talked about viable companies, and clearly you've described Jaguar Land Rover as a viable company. I look at another example in the city, like LDV, who's clearly going through some very similar issues, you would imagine. How would we define a viable company, really? And I think, would you... do LDV deserve the same sort of support that we're advocating and that a lot of people are advocating for Jaguar Land Rover?
Well, I think in the end, the judgment about whether it's a viable company has to be done in conjunction with the banks with whom this guarantee scheme would work. So the banks, are set up to make decisions about commercial loans. The trouble at the moment is they're not making nearly enough loans at all. I mean, they're not lending in the way that they normally do. So there is a well-established practice in financial services of making a judgment about whether businesses have got a long-term future. I don't think people have any doubts about Jaguar Land Rover. The LDV situation is more complicated because there was a management buyout and there's a commitment there to build a new, greener van. And to be honest, I've not studied that in the same detail as I've just been looking at the Jaguar plant. But a company like LDV or a company like Jaguar should have the chance to put their case to a national loan guarantee scheme, and if the judgment is, actually this is a viable business, it's just an innocent victim, if you think of it like that, of the credit crunch. It's not a company that's got some fundamental problems. Then they should get support. I mean, after all, we are bailing out the banks, and we're bailing out the banks not to rescue the bankers, but to ensure that money is flowing in the economy. And the frustration is that Gordon Brown and Peter Mandelson and the like, they're great at getting the headlines and holding the summits and so on. They've not actually delivered any help that's helped protect a single job in the West Midlands.
Now, as you know, we held our West Midlands Summit. We came up with this 10-point plan which we delivered to Lord Mandelson. Of course, improving credit in the system was clearly right up at the top of the agenda, but there were also other initiatives that we would like to see, and certainly commentators within the industry would like to see, particularly on the back of Jaguar Land Rover voting yesterday for shorter working time, which is clearly an issue across the sector. On the continent, they pay, they subsidise the wages and so on. That's something that's being called for in this country. Is that something that a Conservative government could look at?
Well, I think we'll certainly look at it, and indeed I've spent quite a lot for the last couple of months looking at how these schemes work and looking at some of the European examples. I mean, obviously there are some big issues. The biggest issue is cost. I mean, this is not a free scheme. This is something that you and I and everyone watching this has to pay for through our taxes. But equally, of course, if someone becomes unemployed, there's a huge cost to the state. I mean, it's not just a tragedy for that person and their family, it's also a massive burden on the rest of society, because they were previously making a living, paying their taxes, now they're collecting their benefit, and that is a cost. So I think we have to weigh all these things up. I mean, for example, I think there's certainly a case for helping someone who's become unemployed get a new job by saying to an employer who takes them on, we'll cut your national insurance tax, we will give you, in effect, a tax rebate, because that makes sense, because, as I say, the cost of the unemployed person is high. In terms of the short working schemes we've seen on the continent, we are looking in great detail at that. As I say, you've got to make sure the maths add up, and this country, the public finances are in a very bad state after 10 years of Labour government, but we are looking very, very carefully at it.
Looking at the wider issue of the credit crunch, which clearly has precipitated this recession that we're now in, what would a future Conservative government do, or what would a Conservative government do now to increase liquidity within the market? Because it is you talk about national debt and the debt of the future generations, and clearly your latest advertising campaign is very much focused on that. But my understanding is you've supported the bailout of the banks. So what would the Conservatives do different? How would you not have racked up this national debt?
Well, I point people to a couple of things. First of all, you can see in the West Midlands, you can see in Birmingham what the Conservatives do when they're in power locally. And we've kept council tax increases down. Birmingham City Council has kept their increase down to 1.9%. They're helping people who become unemployed, for example, at LDV. They're running an apprenticeship scheme. So you don't have to guess what a Conservative government would be like. You can see some Conservative government locally in the West Midlands. Second of all, what would we do nationally if we were the government? As I've said, get a national loan guarantee scheme up and running, simple, bold, helps companies like Jaguar, but also helps some of the smaller companies that I'll be seeing in the Black Country later. And third of all, have a longer-term vision for the British economy. Of course, we've got to get through the next few months. But I fear that at the moment, Gordon Brown is just sort of applying a sticking model to a broken economic model. He wants to pump up the balloon again and thinks we can go on living beyond our means. And the truth is, as I think people in business or families in the West Midlands know, we can't build an economy on debt again. So households and businesses and government have to learn that they can't make do with the same levels of debts that we've had in the past. We need an economy that's based on much surer foundations of savings and investment. And then we can avoid some of the problems that we've got at the moment. So there is a longer-term Conservative vision as well as practical help now.
Mr. Osborne, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.